Hello and welcome to this video tutorial. I am Roshan and in this video I will be covering the most frequently asked interview questions in Python. We have around 25 questions which cover most of the topics. In this tutorial I will try to explain scenario based use cases to give you guys more depth understanding of questions. This might add some more additional information which can help you to prepare much better. Also we'll try to cover some examples wherever needed. I have categorized these questions in 3 levels. First is for beginner, or you can say basic level. This is mostly referred for the candidate having experience between 0 to 2 years. If you are having experience between 2 to 5, then you fall in intermediate level. And if you are having more than 5 years of experience, then you are at an advanced stage or expert. Categories are designed based on my experience which I have seen in the past. One thing I need to express with you guys, which is very important for any interview. Most of the time we forget to read easy concepts and focus on very advanced topics. An interviewer might ask very basic question for a good amount of experienced candidate as well. So don't skip the basics. If you are at an advanced stage, you should be knowing basics and intermediate questions as well. And if you are at intermediate level, you should know all the basics and somewhat advanced question as well. This tutorial is mainly focused on core Python, designed for beginner and intermediate level, but we had covered a lot of stuff for more experienced people as well. For additional advanced topics, I will be making a separate video. I have not covered OOPS here, as it has a very vast topics and require a separate video series. So I recommend preparing the OOPS as well along with these questions. I will be making separate series for OOPS and will upload in the future. Next, I will be uploading all the questions to our website as well. So if you want to access, you can check our website theprogrammingportal.com and there you can find some interview sections under Python. If you have gone through a recent Python interview, feel free to share your interview experience and questions in the comment section. I will be keeping one voting option in our YouTube community section and website where you can vote what all questions you have encountered in your interview from the list of 25. So this will help our community and viewers for their preparation. Link will be in the description below. And lastly, if you have any queries, suggestions, feel free to comment and I will try to answer those. So let's get started. The very first common question which you should be aware about Python itself. What is Python and what are the key benefits and features of it? This question is asked for beginner level or sometimes it is made scenario based for experienced people as well. Like why Python? Is Python slow or fast in comparison with other languages? Let's understand one by one. So what is Python? In simplest words we can say that Python is high level, object oriented, interpreted and general purpose programming language. And we should highlight some of the major features which we'll see in a minute. Why general purpose? Because Python is designed to be used in range of applications, or you can say multiple domains, like software and web development, automations, game, data science, artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is most famous nowadays, including scientific and computational application and many more. There is a long listing of it. Next, Python is well famous for its easy syntax, which is similar to normal English language and therefore easy to learn. Now, what are the benefits and features? We'll see few of them here. First benefit is it's open source and support cross-platform. It means that it is free and can run on any platform such as Windows, Linux, Unix and Mac. Now coming to next set of benefits. It supports all object-oriented concepts and can be used for normal scripting or enterprise level applications. Most developers, including me, like its dynamically typed features, which means that you don't have to specify any data type while creating variables. It gets automatically assigned during execution. Let us understand this from the example. Let's say you have a variable x and you set the value to 10. Then Python understands and treats this as an integer. Or if I say x equal to some string, then it will automatically understand this is a type of string. It also has very rich set of data structures and libraries. Python is generally referred as interpreted language. It means it executes the code line by line and stops if any error occurs in any line. We will see some more depth later in this video. but for now we can say it is in an interpreted language. It has many other features as well. You can refer the official Python documentation. I will put the link in the description below, but most of them I already listed here. Lastly, some interviewer can ask, is Python slow or fast in comparison with other language? So answer is yes. Python is little slower than other languages like C# or Java due to its dynamic nature. Somewhat interpretation also adds to it. If they ask why Python, then just simply explain its benefits. That's it. Now let's go to the next question. So our next question is, what is pickling and unpickling? This is also one of the most commonly asked questions for beginners and intermediate level. But if you are having good amount of experience, you should be knowing this topic. Let's take an example to understand this. Suppose you have some objects. As you know, in Python everything is object. So it can be anything like dictionary, list or any other object. And you want to store that object state to some files. This can be done with pickle module and process is called pickling. This is also sometimes called serialization. Here objects are converted into byte stream and dumped into some file. In our case, our dictionary object is converted into byte stream and stored into file somewhere on the drive. Whenever your program needs to read that stored object, the process is reversed. Means byte stream is loaded and converted back into objects. This is called unpickling or deserialization. For application, this is mostly used in RPC, that is remote procedure calls, or when you need to transfer some data through the network. You can explore more about its function from the official documentation. Link is in the description below. Let's move to the next question to see how memory management happens in Python. This question can be asked at all levels and some more internal details can be asked in advanced stage. So how memory is managed in Python? If you write any program, it requires some memory space for its variable, objects and just anything. This is handled by Python Memory Manager, or sometimes we say Python Private Heap Space, which is actually where all your objects are stored. Everything is considered as an object in Python. Just make a note of it. Allocation and deallocation of memory is taken care by the Python Memory Manager itself, and you don't have to worry about it as a programmer. The programmer does not have access to this private heap, but Python also provides a garbage collector module which is called GC module, which provides certain functionality for programmers as well. GC recycles all the unused memory and frees the memory and make it available to the heap space. We can also use the del keyword explicitly to delete the objects. Our fourth question is part of basic OOPS concept, that is object-oriented programming. I will be making a separate video series just for OOPS as it is one of the key topics to any of the language and has a lot of things to discuss. So you can subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to get the notification whenever OOPS video will be uploaded. Back to our current topic. If you are familiar with some basics of OOPS, you would be knowing the term called constructor. If you don't know, no worries, let's revise a bit. In simple words, you can say a constructor is a special kind of method. That's it. In Python, constructor is defined as __ init. Instead of double underscore, we call it dunder because it starts and ends with two underscores. There are many other dunder methods in Python. Simple, when you need a constructor, init is what you work on. We sometimes call constructor as a special method as well. So why do we need a constructor? When you have a class and want to access class objects, methods, you access via object.notation. So let's suppose you have an employee class with some object variable like name and age and want to access those. So you will create an object of employee class and use that object to access it. Constructor can be empty or parameterized, but will have a self as a first parameter. We will see self keyword in this video only, so stay tuned. Constructor helps in initialization of variables and do some kind of task if needed at the time of object creation. This also allocates memory to the new object as soon as it is created. All classes will have an init method, or you can say constructor, and Python internally creates this for you if you have not created one. And whenever you create an object or instance of a class, init method is called automatically. The last thing about constructor is, if you have multiple constructor defined in Python, Python always calls the last defined constructor. Let's say if you have constructor A, B and C, and when you create an object, constructor C will be called as it is defined as last. Our next question is frequently asked for fresher or if you are a beginner or with some intermediate level of experience. But some interviewers also ask this question for higher experienced candidate as well, with certain depth which we'll see in a minute. I always recommend that if you have intermediate level of experience, let's say between 2 to 5 years, you should be knowing all the basic questions as well. Same applies for people with more than 5 years of experience. You should revise basics, intermediate questions as well as advanced topics. Many times we are more focused on advanced topics and forget to revise basics. And interviewers can ask basics for more experienced people as well. Not every time, but they do ask. So never skip basic or intermediate level questions if you have a good amount of experience. Coming to our question, what is difference between list and tuple? Both are data structure in Python. So what is the difference between those? First difference is that lists are mutable. It means it is editable. Suppose you have an existing list or you have created a new list, you can modify it. This is called mutability or mutable property. Tuple is exactly opposite to list. It is immutable, means you cannot modify it once created. So it's a kind of list, but we cannot edit that and it will remain constant. This is the first difference. In the list you can modify it, tuple you cannot modify it. Mutability versus immutability. In comparison with speed, lists are slower while tuples are fast. We will see why it is faster in a couple of minutes. List consumes more memory than tuple. This is our third difference. Sometimes why question can be asked here. Means why list consumes more memory. As we know now, lists are mutable, means it can be edited. So we cannot use list as a key in our dictionary. Why? We have a concept of hashing and hashing requires immutability. Whereas tuples can be used as dictionary key. Also, lists are more prone to errors because changes are more likely to occur, whereas tuples are more reliable as we will not be able to change it once it is created. Syntax wise, you will see it's almost the same, except we use square brackets for our list while round brackets for tuples. Earlier we said that tuple is faster while list is slower. But why? This question normally comes at intermediate or advanced level. So the main reason why lists are slower is because lists are stored in two blocks of memory. One block is fixed size, which contains Python object information, and other is variable size for storing data. Whereas tuple is stored in a single block of memory. And why does it not require two blocks? Just think a bit. Because tuples are immutable, so it does not require extra space to store new objects. Now you know the reason behind why lists consume more memory and are slower than tuples. In our earlier constructor topic, we came across a word self. Self represents an object or instance of a class. You can say that it points to the current object. In Python, this is explicitly included as a first parameter when you are creating any constructor or creating any instance method. You get some kind of argument error if you don't specify the first parameter as a self. But sometimes interviewer can ask you whether we can use anything other than self. Can we rename it? So short answer is yes. We can use anything other than self. You can put your name as well in the place of self. But Python recommends using self for readability and better understanding. The name itself says current object. You can go ahead and play around it. Is it a keyword? No, it is not a keyword. So we can name anything. It also helps to differentiate between instance attributes from local variables. Next question we have about lambda function. Most of the time you will be asked about lambda function and they ask you to write some block of code. Lambda function is an anonymous function in Python which does not have any name. Normally when we write any function, we will use the def keyword and then the function name. But in lambda, we don't have any such thing. We use the lambda keyword instead of def. That's why it is called lambda function. And why do we use this? This is very helpful when you don't want to write a separate function, then call that function for some kind of calculation output. Instead, if you require a function which is only needed on that line itself for some calculation and not by every other piece of code. Simple when you want results to be calculated at the same line, and function is only useful there. There are certain things which you need to know. First thing is, it can have any number of arguments, so there is no limit on that, but we can have only one expression or one statement in a lambda function. And of course, to define this, we'll use the lambda keyword. So let us understand this from an example. Let me copy the code and try to show you how it works. Let's say we have two variables x and y. Then we'll have a colon thereafter and we can write expression. So what we do is we take two parameter x and y and we multiply that. Let's assign this and call that with x and y parameter. It will print the result. So let me run this. Lot of time when we deal with some list or dictionary and you want some kind of operation on the fly, you can use it. It's very powerful and most of the developers use it. I have shown you just the basic overview, but you can explore more. We can also wrap our lambda function inside some other functions as well. Next we have what is break, continue and pass in Python. This is for the beginner or freshers. If you have a good amount of experience, they might not ask you this question. If you have some coding background in the past, then you might already be knowing about break and continue. But pass is something specific to Python. So first, what is break? In simple words, it helps to terminate the loop when certain conditions are met. Let's take an example. Suppose we want to print values from 0 to 4 using a range function. And if that value equals to 2, then we just break that loop. So some condition has matched and we are terminating that loop using a break statement. In this example, it will only print 0 and 1. In another scenario, let's say you are trying to search something in a list and if you found, then just exit the loop with break. So you don't have to go and complete the entire loop process. Next is continue. So what continue does? Instead of breaking or exiting the loop, it will just skip the current iteration and continue with the next iteration of loop if certain conditions are matched. That's it. Instead of terminating, your control flows to the next iteration of the loop. Let's take the same example. We will skip the loop if the value matches to 2. So it will first print 0, 1. Then once the condition is matched for 2, then it will skip that statement and go to the next iteration and continue printing 3, 4 and so on. So here it will just print 0, 1, 3 and 4. Third is pass. Pass is specific to Python, whereas continue and break have functionality similar to other languages. Pass is a kind of null operation, means it does nothing, simply nothing. When interpreter sees the pass statement, it does nothing, or you can say it does not execute anything. And remember, pass is used many times, even if it does nothing. Now we have data types. This is one of the very important topics of Python, or you can say in any language. This is the backbone of any programming. It can be asked for fresher or intermediate level as well. They can ask for depth working or scenario based for advanced stage. They will ask you a lot of questions around data type, irrespective of what language you are working on. Here we'll see the most common built-in data types in Python. Python has a very rich set of data types. The interviewer can ask you what are the data types supported by Python or what are the common built-in types. This is one of the vast topics and I will put the link in the description if you want to explore more about it. So let's start. You can list a few important ones and examples of applications around it. I have divided data types based on mutable property. List, dictionary, sets are mutable data types. It means it can be modified once created. We can also have custom data type like user-defined classes, which can be both mutable or immutable based on the properties defined by us. Lists are most commonly used when you want to store some list of data. Dictionary is a key pair value storage, where each key will have some values. This is when we want mapping data, like for the given key name, what is the value stored. We also have sets, which only store unique values and duplicates are not allowed. Next, we have immutable data types that cannot be modified once created. We have integer, string, tuples, boolean, Trojan sets, and again user-defined class. But you would be knowing that we don't specify data type in Python. Yes, you heard it correctly. It is a dynamic type language which we have learned in the first question of this video. Sometimes we categorize our data types like sequence data type, numeric data types, etc. We can use type or isInstance method to check what is the data type of the variable. Interviewer can ask you to differentiate mutable and non-mutable. So you can answer that what we have learned in one of our earlier questions. One last thing, what is difference between set and frozen set? By seeing you can understand that set is a part of mutable, means we can modify it. But if you want our set to be immutable or non-mutable, we will use frozen sets. Frozen means it is not allowed to modify. So these are the basic common data types. There is more you can learn from the official documentation page. Link is in the description below. Next question we have, what is .py and .pyc file? So this is also one of the commonly asked questions. Sometimes the interviewer wants to understand how Python works internally. Let's say you are writing Python code, then you saved with .py extension. That's it. .py are your Python source code files. Then what are pyc files? Python files which are compiled. Most of the time you will read that Python is an interpreted language. But Python also have some internal compilation that we will learn in this video only. So .pyc are the compiled version of Python files. .pyc are only generated for modules and files which you imported and not for the other code files. So we have covered 10 questions till now and have reached to understand what are decorators in Python. It can be asked at any level and they will. You should have a better understanding of how decorator works in Python. So let's start it. We will divide this in two parts. First we'll understand it and later we'll write code to implement the decorator. Coding part I will be covering at the end of this video. So keep watching. First we'll understand why we need decorator. Let's take a scenario where you have created some function with some code and written some output. But let's say there is a requirement to enhance that function. Decorator can help you here to add functionality to an existing function without changing the structure of the function itself. Let us understand this from the very basic example. Suppose you have a simple divide function which divides two numbers and returns the result. If you pass two parameters, it will go and divide it and it will return us the results and you are happy. There is no error handling we kept there. As you know, we cannot divide anything with 0. But as a user, I passed parameters such that it divides with 0. Now your code will break and generate some kind of arithmetic exception, stating cannot divide by 0 or something. So how can we solve this? The one way is to add some validation checks in existing function. As it is a very simple function, it can be done easily. But think of a very large function where you don't want to change the existing structure of that function. Other way is to use the Python decorator to enhance the divide function without modifying the structure of divide function itself. So we'll keep input validation separately in some other function and map that validation function to existing divide function in some way. So in decorator what do? We write different validation function which will accept input as a function and return function as an output. It will also have an inner function in it. Then we decorate the existing divide function with a validation function using the @ symbol. Now when we call divide function, first our decorator function will get called and based on the validation check, we can either return error if validation fails or if succeeded then we perform the divide. Decorator can be used in many applications like validation check, implementing role-based access control mechanism, caching, etc. We will do practical example code at the end of this video to understand its working. So keep watching videos till the end. Next question we have, what is slicing? This is a very beginner level question. So what is slicing? Suppose when we have some data types like list, tuple or string and we want only some part of data from it, we will use slicing. Let's take an example. Let's say we have a string, the programming portal, and I don't want the entire string but only some characters of it. We'll access by providing start and end index. So I can write data, and let's say I want data from the 4th index to the 9th index. So I will write data, then start index colon end index. Here start index will be 4 and the end index will be 10. Start index is inclusive in output, but the end index is not included. It will give characters from 4th index to 9th index. The index always starts with 0. It also has one more parameter, step. Steps is the number of intervals or steps we need to jump. Default is 1. We can slice list as well when we need only particular element. The same way we can write for the list as well. So we have seen slicing now. Next we have a negative index in Python. This is also a beginner level question but most useful when writing the code. We as a developer use negative index many times. You know that every index starts with 0, which means first element will be at 0th index, the second element will be at the first index, and so on. But in Python we also have negative indexes, which starts from -1, -2, -3 and so on. So it's a kind of backward. The last element will have index -1, the second last element will be -2 and so on. So when you want to access element from the end of it, we use a negative index. Suppose we have a list of numbers which constitute 1 to 6. And if I want only the last element, then I can use index -1 and it will give me the output 6. It also helps if you want to reverse the data entirely. One way is to write some logic to reverse the list or string or any sequential data type. But this can be done in a Python in a single line without any logic. That's the beauty of Python. Suppose you have a list having data 1 to 6 and I want to reverse the entire list, then I can just use a negative index with slicing and all will be done. So we'll just write data and we'll keep the start and end index empty and step we need to set to -1. The next question we have is dictionary and list comprehension. This is also a most commonly asked question and can be asked at all stages. For beginners, they will ask some basic knowledge about it, but for the intermediate and advanced level, they might ask you to write some code. I will try to explain a little more about it with an example as this is one of the key topics. Definition is one part, but let's take in a scenario. If you have a certain list, why I am saying list? Because list is very commonly used data structure in Python and everyone can easily understand. Let's say we have a list and I want to perform some operation on it based on some condition. So what will be your approach? Many of us, or even I will say, we definitely need a loop because we want to iterate over the list of items. Then we might need a condition to match criteria and perform operation. Let's say we need to square only the even numbers from the list. In a normal scenario, we write one for loop, then we check if the value is even, then square the number and save it in a list. This will be the 2 steps operation or more than that. So what if I say this all process can be done in a single statement in Python without any complexity? That's what list comprehension comes into picture. It is an elegant, more compact way to create a list and dictionary based on existing iterable objects. In simple words, a kind of combination of loop and condition in one shot. If you see syntactically, there are 2 ways we can write this based on if you need condition or not. Let us take an example where we need a square of even elements in a list. So we have a list and we just write what operation we need. Here squaring of elements, then for x in my list and add even conditional check. Let me run and show you. So what it does, it reads elements one by one and checks if it is even, and if condition is matched, then performs a square of it. This happens for all the list elements. Finally, we'll have a list with squared output. Here we have only one even number, that is 2 in a list, so we'll have 4 as the output. Similarly, dictionary comprehension can also be generated. I want to calculate the square of each element and create a dictionary having a key as a list element and calculate its squared value as a value. What are the benefits of it? As we can see, we can perform mathematical operation on the entire list and dictionary easily and require very less coding. Condition filtering can also be further added. From my perspective, it is one of the important topics and you should be able to write some code as well. Let's move to our 15th question. We have almost covered more than 50% now. What are the docstring in Python? This is again for beginners, but sometimes can be asked for intermediate level as well. So what are docstring? The name itself says what it does. It is a document string. What is the purpose of it? It helps in documenting the code. Of course, not many developers maintain proper documentation, but it is good to have and very important. To even read our old codes and to understand what it does, documentation is very helpful. So when you have any method or class, you can put some document string as a first statement, like a description of what this method or class does. In our example, I have a method called hello, and I have written some text in the first line, which is a docstring. Docstring can also be used for multi-line comment as well. Python provides a doc and help method to access document string. First line of the function or class is a document string if written within triple quotes. Triple single quotes can also work. Next question we have, what are Python iterators? Iterators are something which can be traversed through or iterated upon. It implements the iterator protocol. Again, we'll take a list as an example where we want to iterate over that list. To create an iterator, we'll use the itr method, and to access element, we'll use the next method. Sometimes confusion happens between for loops and iterators, but internally the for loop implements the iterator. So for loop is nothing but an implementation of iterator. So we have a list, and if I want to iterate upon, I can create iterator object using itr method. Then the next method will help in iterating through the data. If there is no element, then it will raise stop iteration exception. Next we have args and cogs in Python. So this is also one of the specific function of Python, where args means arguments and cogs means keyword argument. Args is used to pass multiple arguments. When we don't know how many arguments we will be receiving, we will just use stars and args. Let's say I created a function where I pass two arguments 1 and 2, then the function works. And it will also work if I pass 10 arguments. It will not throw an error. So when we don't know how many arguments we will be receiving, use args. That's why Python is called developer friendly language, as it provides more flexibility to developers. Now what is keyword argument or cogs? So cogs are also used in multiple arguments, but it uses keyword arguments. So you need to specify keyword equals to value while passing the arguments. This helps when we have multiple arguments, and at some point it starts to be difficult to understand which argument to pass in order to have correct value to the function. So we can pass keywords and value to it to have proper control and understanding of arguments. So let's say I need to pass name and age as argument. I can have name equals to Jack and age equals to 25. Args and cogs is a name used just for convention. You can use any other name. Next question is also a kind of beginner level, and it is related to Python environment. Again, some interviewers want to understand if you know some of the basics of Python and how the code runs. So the Python path is an environment variable. If you are using Windows, Linux, Mac, there will be certain things we set as an environment variable. And we can read that environment variable via command line or from the code as well. So Python path is one of the Python specific environment variable, where we have to specify some directory path. And when you import some modules in your code, it checks the Python path to see if the imported package or modules are available in the existing directory. Interpreter uses this environment variable to identify what modules to be loaded. As I said earlier, it is a generic basic level question, but you should be aware about how your Python works and where it looks for module directories before execution of your code. Next question is, what is the Python namespace? In simple words, if I say, namespace is a collection of names and the details of the objects referenced by the names. So what does it mean? In Python, everything is object. It means your string, dictionary, list are all objects. Namespace ensures that your object name, or you can say your list name or dictionary name in your program, are unique and can be used without any conflicts. This is the main purpose. It is internally implemented by Python, which maintains a dictionary where name as a key and map to the respective object value. So we have different namespace like local, global, built-in and enclosed. When we declare something inside a function, then that will be in the local namespace. Also, we have a global namespace where all objects are created at the top level of the program, and that can exist throughout the program. There are also built-in function of core Python for built-in namespace. And we have an enclosing namespace. It is between your inner and global level, which can be accessed at outer function. Now the next question we have, what is PEP8 and why it is important? And what are the few guidelines we have in it? PEP stands for Python Enhancement Proposal. It is the official design documentation, or you can say some guidelines on how to write Python code. It has some set of rules or guidelines about how we should format our code for better readability. There are few basic guidelines we normally follow, such as to use 4 spaces per indent level. In Python, we don't have any enclosed brackets for code, instead we have indentation. Some other guidelines like function and variable name should be starting with a lowercase, and if there are multiple words, they should be separated by underscores. Other guideline is we should always import on separate lines. There are many more design recommendations. You can read more about it from the official link mentioned in the description. Next, we have about certain functions, which are mostly asked at the beginner or intermediate stage when they want you to write some code or examples. The interviewer might ask, write some code to split some string or join or do some regex. So we have a few functions like split, join, sub and subn. We'll understand one by one. So what does split do? Suppose you have a string and you want to split that string based on certain delimiter like space. Then we'll use split function. We can have a delimiter like comma, hyphen or anything. We can write a string dot split and then specify what is the delimiter and it will be done. We also have one max parameter, which is how many numbers of split or maximum number of splits we need. Most of the time we split on the entire string itself. Next we have a join. So when you want to join a list of string based on certain delimiter to give you a single string. It is the inverse of what we do with the split. Splitting splits the string and join will join the string back. We also have the regex, or you can say regular expression in Python, and for that we have RE module. It also has a split function, which is the same thing. You want to split something based on some regex pattern. Next we have sub. So it means find all substrings where regex pattern matches and replace with some different string. And lastly we have subn, which is similar to sub, except subn also returns how many replacement it has done. Let us move to the next question. Our next topic is about generators, which is also one of the key concepts in Python. So again, I will try to explain based on scenario. Suppose you want a certain list of items or list of numbers. There are few ways you can generate it. Either you declare all the values or use a range function to generate that sequence. But in the above approach, sequence is generated at once and the entire set, or you can say entire set of items, will be made available in the memory. This is okay if you have a small sequence. But let's say you want to generate millions of sequences. And if you use a range function, then it generates that many sequences at once and will be stored and made available in the memory itself. This can take very high memory utilization, which is not good. So how should we solve this? Yes, use a generator. So a generator is a kind of function, but its behavior is little different. Generator will generate sequence of items as needed, meaning for millions, all items will not be generated at once like normal range function. Instead, it returns a sequence as needed by yield operation. One item is generated at a time. So it is very memory efficient, and whenever we need an item, we can use the next function. We can have more than one yield statement as well. If you call the generator function, it will return the generator object. Then you can use the next function on that object to get the next sequence of items as needed. What is the use of it? It is very memory efficient and helps in generating infinite sequence or very large sequence without any overhead of memory. Also, it is very easy to implement. Syntactically, if you see, it looks similar to list comprehension with only one change. We use round brackets for generator and square brackets for the list.
This is a very interesting topic, or you can say it is a very interesting question and can be asked at all levels. If you have good amount of experience, then the interviewer will try to understand how much depth you know. So let's begin.
If you go to Python official website, it says that Python is an interpreted language. And some people say Python is not a compiled one, or it is only a interpreted language, which is partially right. Let us try to understand this one by one. First, what is compilation? Just want to emphasize one statement that interpreted or compiled is not the property of language, but it is a property of its implementation. So if you know, Python has a different implementation. There are CPython, Jython and many more as well.
Compilation is something like when you write certain code, it gets converted into bytecode, then this bytecode is executed. Means it converts the high level language to machine code before execution. Then execution happens at the next stage. Let's say you have some code written in Java language. You first compile the Java code using Java compiler, which generates a .class file. In the next step, you run this bytecode using Java command. So if you see, it is a two-step process. It is also faster. Why? Because once compiled, the same code can be executed without recompiling if there is no code change. Means it does not have to be recompiled again. Yes, if any code is modified or changed, we need to compile it again. Now let's move to interpreting. Python officially say it is an interpreted language. Interpreter runs through a program line by line, convert to machine code and execute each command on go. It means instead of a two-step process, these two stages happen at the same time, or you can say as a single stage itself. So interpreter runs through the program line by line, convert it first, then execute at the same time on the go. So you don't have two different commands, first for compilation then for execution. It is little bit slower because both operations happen at the same time, so it is slower. Now coming to our actual question, is Python interpreted? Yes, as per the official documentation, it says Python is an interpreted high-level programming language. But internally, compilation happens in Python as well. But generally, we call Python as an interpreted language. As it happens at the single stage as we discussed earlier, first the interpreter reads line by line, converts it, and does the execution. So both happens at the same stage. As a programmer, we might not notice, but technically, compilation happens internally and Python has CPython. I found a very good article on Stack Overflow. You can read more about it from the link in the description below. So if next time your interviewer asks if it is an interpreted language, you can say yes, Python is an interpreted language, but it also has some internal compilation and explain what we have discussed. Next we have what is scope resolution and what are local and global variables. It is similar to what we have learned in namespace. So what is scope resolution? Scope refers to the availability and accessibility of an object in code. Let's say if you have a variable, then from which all places we can access that variable. If I declare a variable inside a function, then its scope is limited within that function only, and that variable will not be accessible from outside the function. This is what we call a local variable, and it is present in local space. But let's say we declare a variable outside a function or in a global space, then they are accessible from anywhere in the code and are called global variables. We have an example where name is declared inside a function, so it is part of local scope and called local variable. And next we declare outside the function, so it can be accessed outside or inside the function as well. So finally coming to our last question. After this we will see our decorator example, so let's begin. This question can be asked if you are a beginner or at intermediate level. So what are modules and packages in Python? Can we name some of them? In simple words, a Python module is a simple Python file which you write as a code which contains some function classes. It is a .py file. Examples are employee modules, customer modules, etc. So what are packages then? To organize all the modules, we have packages. We keep all similar modules in a single package. So next time if you try to import, we do import the package name, then write module name or a class name. In a package, we can have modules or sub packages as well. So how to understand if it is package?
Whenever we create a package, it will have __init.py file. When working on large projects, we create separate packages which can contain similar classes or modules. For example, in the employee package, we can have all employee related classes that can be kept in the employee package. There are few common built-in modules which gets used frequently, like OS module, system module, math, random, and JSON module. You can have your own custom modules or packages as well. That's it. As I promised, I will show you an example of decorator to get more understanding. So let's do that. Remember from our previous topic what decorators are. Let me just refresh it. Decorators is used to enhance the existing function without changing the structure of your existing function. We'll see validation example for our divide function. So here we have created a divide function which takes 2 parameters and return the result. This is without a decorator, or you can say in a normal scenario. If we run, it will give us result and we are happy. So let me run this. Now let's say if I pass 0 as a second parameter, then it will give some exception. So let's try to do that. Let me pass 0 and let me rerun this. So as you can see, it gives some exception, 0 division error. To solve this, we can add a validation stage in the same divide function, or we can use a decorator. We will be using decorator here. So I have created another function for validation check. It takes one parameter which is a function and return inner function. Here we have inner function which will take input which is for our validation, that is x and y. Then checks if y equals to 0, then print error and return nothing. Else call the func parameter, which in our case is perform divide, by passing the same x and y and return the result. Now we just map this validation function to our divide function using a decorator. Now it will look like this. And if you call perform divide, first validation function will be called, and if validation passed, it will call perform divide from there itself, otherwise just return error. So let us try to debug this. Let me step into my code. Now you see first this function get called, inner validation function. You can see func here, and let us go to next line. And here you can see this condition is satisfied. Now we can move to next line. Now perform divide is called and result is returned. So this covers our top 25 most commonly asked questions for Python designed for basic or intermediate level. I recommend preparing the OOPS concepts as well along with these questions. I will be making separate series for OOPS and will upload in the future. Also try to get the grasp on basics, intermediate and some advanced topic as well. And don't forget to vote in the community sections if you have gone through a recent Python interview. And yes, I am not a regular on my YouTube channel, but I am trying to get most out of it and working on some other stuff as well. If you like this content, hit that like button, and if you want to subscribe to our channel, just hit that subscribe button and press that bell icon. So you will get notified whenever new videos gets uploaded. Thanks for watching. See you next time.